Okay, this is how to edit headshots for the Warehouse Dramaturg. I use Photoshop. The version that I have on my computer is kind of a condensed version of Photoshop, but you can find Photoshop on any of the school computers that are in the Mac lab and the PC lab underneath the library. A couple things, if you've never used Photoshop before, that you want to make sure you have access to are the layers window, and I personally like to have access to the navigator window. That helps me move around. If you don't have access to either of those things, you can come up here to the window button and make sure that the little check mark next to layers is on and the check mark next to navigator is on, and then you'll be able to, navigator lets you, when you're really zoomed into the photo, easily scroll up and down over here instead of trying to use these, which I usually think are kind of more touchy than this, where you can just see immediately what part of the face you're looking at. And you can zoom in and out without having to use the zoom in and out controls. I just think it's a lot quicker. And then the layers, so I've just opened up one of the headshots that I took. I usually take the headshots zoomed out further than they're really going to be, because you always have to crop them, because the aspect ratio of the camera is a little bit different than what we want for the finished product. So when you first open a picture, the background, it's labeled background in the layers window, and it will have a lock next to it. You can't edit the layer if it's locked, so you don't want to just double click that and hit OK, and that'll just unlock the layer for you. Next, I'm going to zoom in a little bit so I can see what I'm doing better, and grab the rectangular marquee tool, which may be hidden under like a circle, so if you don't see it, if you see the elliptical marquee tool, just hold that button down and different options will pop up for you to click on. If we want the rectangular one, then we want to change the mode from normal to fixed ratio, and the ratio we want is 8:10, so then when we go to get the pictures printed, it'll already be the right size to print. The headshots, typically, this is what I've heard from the actors nuts and bolts class, should go from about the top of the head to like mid boob. So you're going to select that area. I just held down my mouse and dragged it, and then I used my arrow keys to nudge the box back and forth to get it exactly where I wanted it. And then once you've got that in the right spot, you just hit edit or image and crop right here, and that'll automatically get you working with the right size image. Next, what I do first, I really only do two things to these because you have to get through a lot of them and you don't want to spend way too much time on it, is I look for blemishes and then I just adjust the levels. So if you want to do the blemishes first, make a new layer so that whenever you're editing anything, if you do something that you end up not liking, you can always just get rid of that layer, whereas if you're doing it directly on the original picture, then if you mess it up, you can't really go back. So whichever layer you're working on is indicated over here, whichever one's highlighted when you click on it. And sorry, I just kind of did it without thinking about it, but the way that you create a new layer is by clicking on this button right here. It just looks like kind of like a page turning. That will give you a new layer. So like here's a blemish right here. The easiest way, there are two ways that you can fix little like skin issues like this. One is the spot heal brush, which looks like a band-aid. You want to make sure that your brush is size, you can see the brush size outlined where your cursor is bigger than the actual like blemish. And the quickest way to change the size of your brush, you can see how the size of this brush like outline is increasing and decreasing, is by hitting the bracket buttons on the keyboard, which are right next to the P. So if you hit one side of the bracket, it makes it smaller. If you hit the other side of the bracket, it makes it bigger. That's just a way to do that quickly. So you're just going to center your spot healing brush over the pimple and then just click. It'll load for a second, and then basically it'll disappear. What it's doing is it's sampling everything in the radius around the circle and using that to replace what's inside the circle. So one of the downfalls of the spot healing brush, one of the places that it does not work well, is if you're on the edge of a certain, like, so say she had a zit like on her eyebrow and you went like that. Usually it looks really weird because it can, so like see how there's a darker mark right there? It's sampling the outside of the ring, which at this point is the eyebrow, and it's putting that inside the ring. So it's putting this darker eyebrow color just straight on her forehead. That's why I don't prefer the spot healing brush, but if you want to just get things done really quickly, and if they are kind of out in the middle of nowhere, like that first blemish that I did was, then it's really a pretty good choice. The other way, I'm just going to undo what I did so I can show you the other way, is the clone stamp tool, which looks like a stamp. The default setting will be to have it on a pretty blurry brush, and you want to make sure that the opacity is not at 100%. It probably shouldn't. It probably somewhere around 60 to 70% is good, but what this does is you're manually sampling the area that it's going to replace the brush with. So you hold down the Alt button, click on the part of the nose or whatever, the face that you want to manually sample, and now as you move this brush around, what the brush is painting is a sample of this area right here that you just clicked on when you had the Alt button down. So basically this is our paint, and we're just going to put it right here over the blemish and it covers it up. Again, we're doing all this on this extra layer, not on the original, so if we end up doing something horribly wrong and we hate it, you can just delete that layer or turn the visibility off and you're back to normal. Honestly, this picture doesn't really have that many blemishes. I usually don't go hog wild on fixing things. Oh, here's another. This is another reason that clone stamp is a little bit better than the spot tool. So like, see how this blemish right here is like in the crease of her smile? So this is when you can be really precise and make sure that you're sampling another area that has the shadow of that crease in it, like that, instead of sampling an area that's brighter, like that. I mean, it's really not noticeable, but if you're doing this over a larger area of the face, and the kind of values get altered, and then there's not shadow anymore where the shadow is supposed to be, it ends up looking really unnatural. So the clone stamp brush, I think, just gives you a lot more control over exactly what values you're putting where. And yeah, again, if you had the spot healing brush and there was like a blemish around the mouth and you were to do it at the edge of the mouth, it would sample that pink right into the skin, and it looks really weird. But it is like quicker than doing clone stamp because you don't really have to think about it, you just do it. But I mean, this picture looks pretty good. There's a couple little blemishes that, like, it honestly does not take long to fix. Also, so when you're using the clone stamp tool, the first area that you select when you're holding the Alt button down and clicking, once you start, say, painting with that area, see how I'm now holding the mouse button down, you can see where that little plus sign is. That's where you're sampling. So if you were to like stroke all the way across the face, you could replace, that whole streak, and the plus sign shows you where you're sampling. So like right now I'm sampling her eyebrow right into her eyeball. Like, not that you would ever want to do that, but just to show you that's what the clone stamp is doing. So the area that you're sampling isn't just like this tiny piece of forehead over and over and over again. It moves with your selection, and that's what makes it look so realistic, is that it like naturally emulates the the way that the lighting hits the person's face. Just gonna, undo those because obviously they don't make any sense. And yeah, okay, so blemish is done. Great. Next, this part's even easier. Go back to layers. Stay on the high. The other thing about layers is it's like, any program where you say send to front, send to back. That's what dragging these between each other does. So if you drag the original picture onto the top, it'll basically cover up all the blemish changes that you just did. So you want the blemish layer to be on top. Then you click on the top layer, and then go down to this like black and white circle icon, and click levels. This will create a new layer right here that is adjusting all the layers beneath it. I typically take the levels, and what you want to look for, you can hit auto level, but that does weird things to the colors. I like to just level it for brightness. Typically what you're looking for is like a flat line either at the beginning or at the end of like this weird spectrum thing that shows up here. So you just want to kind of drag it to cut out that flat line, basically. Which right now I think is a little too bright. I think it's a little too hot. But like, no, this is too dim. So and on this side there's no flat line, so I would not really move this one much. I don't know. Levels are confusing, but it helps you if you just kind of tinker with it, figure out a better like luminosity for the picture than what it originally had, and it adjusts the contrast and I don't know, just the quality of the picture without having to mess with it too much. So when I click the visibility of this layer on and off, you can see the difference between how it started out and then how much crisper it looks after we did the levels. And then with that, I'm basically done. One other so when you're done, you're gonna want to save it as, there's a chance that you want to edit this picture again, save it as a Photoshop file, which is the default. If you just hit save as and hit OK, it will save as a Photoshop file, which is not something that you can get printed at a store. I just one and done. Name it the person's name. I don't think I'm ever going to edit this again. I'm just going to save it as a JPEG. Hit OK. That is a format that you can send either a JPEG or a PNG, like upload them on like Walmart's website to get them printed. If you save it as only a Photoshop file, you cannot get it printed. So when you save it, you just need to remember to save everything as either JPEG or PNG. If there's a chance you think you're going to want to edit it later again, you can save it as a Photoshop file, because that'll allow you to get back in there. But with something as simple as this, I don't really think that's necessary. Another last thing that I do sometimes, I don't always do this because it's usually not necessary, but sometimes if someone's skin is really rough or like porous, and it's just like not something that you want to fix with the clone stamp tool or the blemish tool, but just something that kind of looks weird, what I usually do for that is, I'll turn this off for now, pretend we haven't done that yet. You have to do the levels adjustment last. So a thing that I'll do is I'll just create, hang on, I want to get this out of here. I will, let's see, I'm trying to remember how I even did this. I think, okay, pretend I haven't done that yet. I'll merge this down so that now the adjustments are on the original layer, and I'll go to Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur, and then I'll just do it a little bit. Oh, never mind, hang on. I remembered what I usually do.